Wow, it's been a long time since I've discussed some comics on here. I did one episode of Horror Comic Timelines a while back, and it was something that I intended to return to, and just didn't. But recently, I sat down and was reading some of the Nightmare on Elm Street comics, and I thought it might be kind of fun and interesting to go through the publication timeline here and see if there's anything that ties into the film series, or if the idea of continuity in comics is just a dream. Believe it or not, but the first company to put out any comics related to the Nightmare series was Marvel. Freddy Krueger's A Nightmare on Elm Street was released in magazine format in black and white in 1989, around the same time that Part 5 debuted. The first issue had a gorgeous Joe Jusko cover and has a story with a young woman who obviously just had a dream encounter with Krueger. She survives and continues to fight back against him, and we also meet Dr. Julianne Quinn, who is reading about Amanda Krueger's horrible incident, which is given as happening in 1946 at Christmas time. And then it states that he was adopted in November of 47 at 9 weeks old. But less than 1 day later, a couple of burglars killed the parents and stole little Freddy, who looks kind of big, like the artist had no clue what a 9-week-old baby should look like, I guess. He was then raised by the thieves until his early teenage years, when he killed them and ran off. He spent the next couple of years on the streets, learning to control his dreams, until his fantasy world bled into his reality and he started killing the children. And the portions with his adoptive parents and upbringing seem to contradict the movies, so this can either be its own universe, not connected to the movies, but it can also be that she's reading an unconfirmed version of his story. She's reading a letter from a nurse that worked with Amanda, so it's possible that she's just wrong on some of her facts. Julianne and Allison fight against Freddy, manifesting dream abilities, and they're both revealed to be Elm Street kids and confront him in the dream world. It should be noted that these issues were both written by Howard the Duck creator Steve Gerber, and when Freddy manages to kill Julianne, Allison dreams up her own defense powers and fights back, but ends up being taken to solitary confinement and sedated, ending the issue on a cliffhanger. But it was never continued, because even though Marvel had solicited up to issue 5 and accepted stories from Buzz Dixon and Peter David, and the book sales were through the roof, they canceled it after just 2 issues. Not because of angry parents, but because of the anticipation of those angry parents, and the remaining issues were never finished. It didn't stay away for long though, because just 2 years later, in 1991, independent publisher Innovation got the rights and put out a couple of different series. The first one was simply called Nightmares on Elm Street and ran for 6 issues. It was written by Andy Mangels and introduces Sybil, who was Nancy Thompson's college roommate and has an obsession with Jack the Ripper, and starts seeing Freddy in her dreams. It features the return of Dr. Sims from the 3rd film and says that Nancy died 3 years ago. So this is set 3 years after Dream Warriors, so around 1990, and recommends that she reaches out to Neil Gordon, who is now doing work with sleep disorders. Soon, Freddy's showing up, killing Sybil's friends, and before he can kill her, she's rescued by Dream Nancy. We learn that Kristen saved her by putting her into the dream world when she said that she would dream her into a beautiful dream as she died. Through hypnosis, she's reunited with Neil, and Freddy kills Sims, although it's in Neil's dream, so it's unknown if that actually kills her or if it's just a construct. They end up escaping into the place that holds the souls of unborn children who mention Jacob and then tear Freddy apart. Sybil is then attacked by a dream Jack the Ripper, presumably killing her. The next issue brings back Alice and Jacob, and she immediately says it's 6 years later, which means it's now around 1995, 5 years after the first 2 issues. Jacob is older now, and they've moved away, but are returning to Springwood because Alice's father has passed away. Jacob has telepathic abilities, and Neil is in a coma, tended to by Yvonne from Part 5. And she says that he was in a car crash 3 years ago, which killed the woman he was with, meaning Sybil, but that's a little off with the dates. When they visit Dan's gravestone, Jacob's dad, the dates are hidden, but he died in '89. And when it's time to fight Kruger, the spirits of the Dream Warriors return. And I guess Kincaid can turn into a panther for some reason? There's a brief appearance of the Dream Demons, and they all fight Freddy, stabbing him, and it gets a little weird because that kills Dream Nancy and also Neil, but when they return to the waking world, Dan's spirit has entered Dr. Gordon's body. Their next 3-issue miniseries is an adaptation of the 6th movie, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and it pretty much is just the movie in comic form, and there's really no differences or anything, except maybe a much bloodier death for Carlos and slightly less goofy death of Freddy. It doesn't mention anything about the previous series or Alice and Jacob. They did offer a 3D version of the final issue as well to go along with the ending of the film. The third and final Innovation series was again written by Mangels and was Nightmare on Elm Street: The Beginning, another 3-issue miniseries. It picks up where Freddy's Dead left off, with Maggie and the Doc and Tracy discussing the death of Freddy, but still feeling his presence. The girls go back to Springwood to uncover Kruger's past, and they find a book with details from his history showing us 1966 as he chases his first victim, and then back to when he killed Alice Cooper, or I guess his foster father, but here it's revealed that he did that at the behest of the Dream Demons. They dig up that guy's body, releasing his spirit, and then we're shown part of his trial and his eventual release after they have to drop the charges. Of course, as we're aware, the town decides to take vengeance in its own hands, and they trap him and set him on fire, with the Dream Demons then giving him supernatural powers. The second issue ends with that and Maggie witnessing it and vanishing with only Freddy's hat left behind. Tracy then sees the old boiler room, and it ends on a cliffhanger, but there was only 1 issue left, which never saw release. At this time, Innovation declared bankruptcy, and the third and final issue went unpublished. Mangels would post a portion of the script for the issue on his website for a time, but it's incomplete, although it starts with a face-off in hell with Freddy and the pair of women, and the appearance of a Queen Dream Demon, and the pages that would show the fight are blank. It ends with another abused young man being approached by the demons, so a new dream killer would arise. In 1992, Trident Comics would release a 4-issue magazine series called Freddy's Nightmares. There were no original stories offered in these, and instead they would simply reprint the Innovation series as well as part of the Marvel magazines. 1 year later, he'd make his last appearance for a while, and it was just a 2-panel cameo in Topps Comics' adaptation of Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. Like the movie, after Jason is drawn down to hell, Freddy's gloved hand reaches up and drags it down there as well. He'd vanished from comic shelves for 12 long years, and it wouldn't be until 2005 that Avatar Press would take on the license, and they kicked things off with the Nightmare on Elm Street special, a one-shot written by Brian Pulido and gorgeous art from Juan Jose Rip. And it has Lindsay here, and it says it's now, so possibly in real time 2005, and set post Freddy vs. Jason. She's aware of who Freddy is, and when she wakes up ranting about him, they take her to Weston Hills. Her friend Emily follows, and it looks like this is in continuity with their Texas Chainsaw comics, as there's a headline about Leatherface returning. In that same panel, the calendar matches 2005. So yeah, that's when they're setting this. And Freddy starts doing what the Fred be doing. And in order to keep Freddy's fear suppressed in the town, the authorities sedate her, so Freddy kills her. A few months later, the same team came back for a 3-issue series called A Nightmare on Elm Street, Paranoid. And there's a new heroine named Claire, who sees visions of all the characters who died in the special, and Freddy's here as well, and he wants her to spread the word about him to regain power. And she starts doing that, and it's a little weird because Springwood just had a rash of killings, what would have been about a year ago with Freddy vs. Jason, so you'd think that Freddy would be a bit fresher on their minds. When a huge shipment of Hypnosil is destroyed, Claire ends up having a breakdown and is almost sent to Weston Hills. And oh man, Pulido just has the worst grasp on writing slang dialogue. This was in 2005, and dudes are named Money, and people are saying word. So of course Freddy has to appear in a pimp outfit. Fred does his best to spread fear in the school, and honestly, the best part of this series is the collection of gorgeous covers for each issue. There were like 3 to 4 different options for each one, and the artwork is pretty great. The final issue has the police worried about Freddy spreading, and they say that they've been covering him up for over 20 years, which would be accurate if he started in the mid-80s. They mention Nancy, the Dream Warriors, Master, and Child, so it's clear that this is in continuity with the original film series. And we see that Claire is an original Elm Street kid, and her parents were a part of the group that killed him. And if she's around 18, that means that they had her in the late 80s and were probably in their 40s when they had her. She brings him out of her dream and into the real world in front of the whole school and humiliates him so that no one fears him, which destroys him. And it's hilarious because multiple times it's mentioned that they have shotguns, and yet Rip just drew a handgun, and no one made the correction to the script. And then it's 6 months later, so presumably in 2006 now, and it's clear that the Dream Lord is still active. The series had some publishing delays, and the 3-issue series took around a full year to release, with the 2nd and 3rd issues not coming out until 2006. Avatar's take on the franchise ended that same year with the Nightmare on Elm Street Fear book, which remains at the Springwood High School, and it's made clear that the students are still on Hypnosil, and Claire appears to not be dead, but is trapped in his dream realm. And high school girl Christina is caught in a drugstore holdup, and one asks for a 2006 Cadillac, showing the year it's set in, while at the same time showing that Pulido has clearly never spoken to anyone black in his entire life. Like, every single black character in any one of his books is pretty much just a collection of vaguely racist stereotypes. Like, take for example, again, Word and Get Me Some Fago, bitch? Like, seriously? Anyway, she drugs the robbers, and they dream, and Freddy kills them, and that was the end of the Avatar era. Right around this same time, Wildstorm launched their horror line and would do their takes on Jason, Leatherface, and of course, Freddy. They started with an 8-issue series simply titled A Nightmare on Elm Street, and it had Chuck Dixon on writing duties, and kicked off with an arc called Freddy's War. And Jade and Brad are moving into a new house, because even in comic books, moving is the greatest terror. Their new home is in Springwood, and very quickly Brad is killed by Freddy, and they assume it was a suicide. Jade meets Kaylee, and she tells her about Freddy and says that all the kids at school are aware of him and were given a recap of his story. She keeps encountering a little blonde girl in a hospital gown, and somehow Kaylee is able to enter her dreams, but is injured. There's then a bit where she tells her dad what's going on, and in possibly one of the most refreshing things to see ever, he just believes her and pledges to help her no matter what. She then teams up with her military dad and the little girl who is in a coma, and I guess in this universe people can just be in each other's dreams without the help of Kristen or being taught how to do it. They just do it. And after a battle with Krueger, they think that they're safe, only for Jade to be killed. The little girl wakes up and is given a transplant from Jade's heart while Dad sticks around to fight Freddy. The next issue brings little Lacey back, and she's driving the Fred crazy by just popping in and out of Dreamworld, so he recruits a human to help him track her down and kill her. The cops eventually kill that guy, and Lacey's family moves away, freeing Freddy from her torture. The next arc is called Demon of Sleep and has our guy still at work in Springwood, and it's hard to tell where this story takes place in terms of the continuity. Like, there's no references to any events of the movie, and no one seems to have any knowledge of any of the other killings, but they do seem to sort of know who Freddy is. One of the students says that he's been dead for 40 years, which would place this around the 2006 era of things, although it could just be a general number, so anywhere around that would work. But definitely post all of the films, including Freddy vs. Jason. The kids are all concerned that they're the next victims, so they come up with a plan to call up the spirit of an Aztec protector warrior to fight in their stead. But in order to do so, they have to offer a sacrifice, so they use the jerky jock. Their plan doesn't exactly go very smoothly, but just when it appears like the demon is winning, Felicity wakes up and they're all arrested for murder. The final issue is just a single issue tale of a fast food worker attacked by Freddy, unconnected to any of the other storylines. So around the same time, there was a one-shot called New Line Cinema's Tales of Horror, featuring short tales of all the licenses they carried at the time, with the first story being about Leatherface and the second about Freddy. It has a copycat killer named Otis that Krug confronts and eventually kills, but the police end up pegging a lot of the Springwood murders on him, possibly taking away some of the Dream Killer's powers. 1 year later, in 2008, Wildstorm teamed up with Dynamite in order to release Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, a comic adaptation of the abandoned script for the follow-up to FVJ. It's a 6-issue series that picks up after the events of the movie and says that it's 5 years later, so in 2008, and the opening shows that in that time a new S-Mart has been opened up in Crystal Lake, and Will and Laurie return there, only to have Jason show up and quickly kill them both. We see that he's kept Freddy's head and puts it next to his mom's, and it's clear that he's not dead since he shows up in his dreams and asks him to help retrieve the Necronomicon, since according to Jason Goes to Hell, it's in the Voorhees house. Ash is on hand as well, and everyone ends up at the old house, with Ash getting the book and saving a young girl named Bree. After a fight at the store, Jason gets the book, and it restores Krueger, and he plans to use it to have control of the waking world, and they just kind of rip off Watchmen. Freddy's now able to warp reality, but Jason gets mad that he didn't use it to help him and Welch on their deal, so he fights back, and the book states that the Necronomicon was used to bring Jason back after he drowned and is a form of Deadite. Ash blasts him in the face with a shotgun, revealing his face, and then cutting off his arm. So Jason imitates Ash's chainsaw hand with his machete. And there's a final fight, and I assume that deadlines were a bit tight because the drop in art quality in between issues is pretty drastic. And after the three duke it out, one of the S-Mart workers named Carrie reads from the book and banishes Fred into the big portal thing. And this is a tiny pet peeve, but anytime anyone reads from the book in this series, they only say Klaatu Varata Nikto instead of the Konda stuff from the other movies. Jason gets crashed into the icy waters, and Freddy is portalized, and Ash and Carrie drive off together. That was popular enough that they ran with a sequel, created exclusively for the comics. It came out 1 year later, in 2009, and was titled Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, The Nightmare Warriors, and without the constraints of writing for a budget, it was a much crazier storyline. It's said that 24 hours after the ending of the last one, so still 2008, and a shady Black Ops group is there to recover the book, but they revive Jason as well, who retrieves what's left of his mask. It then jumps 6 months and says it's July 2nd, and the last story was 6 months ago, so if that was early '08, then this is summer '08, and Ash and Carrie are still together and in Michigan. Maggie Burroughs from Freddy's Dead shows up and says she's working with Neil Gordon to create a group to fight the supernatural. He turns her down, but Jason shows up to kill Carrie, but Ash is blamed for it and goes on the run. Meanwhile, Project Black Book uses the Necronomicon to bring Freddy back as a human being, and we then see that Maggie and Neil are a couple, and also see Rennie from Jason Takes Manhattan and Tina from The New Blood, although they're both drawn like they're 18-year-old cheerleaders. There's then Stephen Freeman and his daughter Stephanie, and she's also like an 18-year-old kid, even though she was an infant in Jason Goes to Hell. So, here's the thing. The events of parts 7, 8, and 9 had to be pretty close together. Like they're all probably within a time period of 5 or 6 years. And theoretically, Freddy vs. Jason was set somewhat soon after part 9. If 18 years or so passed for little Stephanie, then the same should be for the others, and Tina and Rennie would be around 40 or so, but sure aren't drawn that way. Ash joins them, and Alice and Jacob are here too, and Jason attacks, killing Steven, so I guess that no amount of handcuff jumping could save him, but then they're saved by the return of Tommy Jarvis. And again, he should be around 40 years old or so, but is still drawn like a 20-something dude. But it appears as if Freddy isn't as human as thought, and still has his reality warping powers, and restores Jason to his full human form. And okay, here's where things get really weird. It's revealed that Maggie is actually evil, and in league with Freddy, and I guess makes out with him, like, ew. She kills Rennie, and an entire army of Deadites, led by Jason, is unleashed. They attack the White House, and there's a big fight with the military involved, and Tina drops a tank down on top of Maggie, killing her. Freddy kills Alice, and she passes the Dream Master powers onto Jacob, who calls up the Dream Warrior souls and Amanda to fight back. They destroy the Deadite army, and Tommy and Jason have a final showdown revealing his normal face. For some reason, Tina, telekinetic powerhouse, is essentially absent from all this, but Stephanie and Tommy eventually chop off Jason's head, killing him for good. Nancy's spirit shows up to help out, and they once again open that portal. The Dream Demons strip Fred of his powers, and a now human Freddy is boomsticked. It's hinted that Jason is still alive after all, and there's a weird bit where one of the CIA agents, who was accidentally sent back in the portal, and goes back to the arrest of Freddy and signs that warrant, like I suppose ensuring that Freddy would go to jail and never become Freddy in the first place. It's now been about 13 or 14 years, and no Freddy comics have been made since then, and it's pretty questionable where the rights even lie. So there you have it, several different companies, a whole bunch of different series, and yeah, a lot of different continuity snarls here. It seemed as if each different publisher kind of took its own concept of how the continuity works. Several of these could work with the others. It would be fine if it works in there. Obviously, some of them don't really. But yeah, for the most part, they don't really bother the other continuities. But let me know if you enjoyed this, if you liked hearing about the different comic book versions of Freddy and the Nightmare series. Let me know if there's any others that you know about. I went with the officially licensed version, but let me know if you know of any other fan comics or unofficial ones out there. Put it down below in the comments. I'd like to hear about those. And if you enjoyed this video, let me know that down below in the comments too. You can also hit that like button to let me know you liked it. If you enjoy what you see on the channel, hit subscribe. And also think about going to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines like these guys do over here. I appreciate that. I appreciate you just watching this video, and I will see you very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.